The soft hum of the jet engines reverberated throughout the luxurious cabin of the airplane. The world outside was a stretch of endless blue sky, tranquil and inviting, as the plane cruised at 35,000 feet. The passengers of Flight 728 were comfortably settled in their seats, drifting between light conversation, reading, or sleep, enjoying the perks of their plush first-class accommodations. Among them was Richard Devereux, a high-powered businessman dressed in an impeccable navy suit. He was not accustomed to compromise, and he didn't expect to deal with any today. Everything in his life was precise, calculated, and controlled. Until it wasn't. Sitting across from Richard, tucked quietly into the plush seat of the first-class cabin, was Captain Emily Carter, a female Air Force officer. She had short, efficient hair, her crisp military uniform betraying an aura of quiet authority and humility. Richard glanced at her, his jaw tightening. How could she, an officer, of all people, be upgraded to first class? His seat was earned, paid for with the sweat of his brow, the long hours in the boardrooms, the constant grind of running a successful business empire. And now, here was this woman, upgraded for what? Wearing a uniform? Serving her country? His irritation festered as he imagined her being bumped ahead of other deserving passengers, of himself, just for wearing an Air Force patch. She doesn't belong here, he thought bitterly. It would only get worse from there. Title: A businessman is furious when a female Air Force officer is upgraded to first class. But when a mid-flight emergency occurs, she reveals her true abilities and leaves everyone shocked. Richard Devereux was a man of means, the CEO of a cutting-edge tech company that was revolutionizing the market. Every aspect of his life was a testament to his success. He had climbed the corporate ladder through grit and ruthlessness, amassing power, influence, and wealth. For Richard, life was transactional. What you earned was a direct reflection of your efforts. He had little patience for anything that disrupted the balance of his world. Emily Carter, on the other hand, came from a different kind of life. She was a decorated Air Force officer, highly respected in her field and known for her calm under pressure. Having served multiple tours, Emily had seen her share of crises that tested the limits of human endurance, physically and mentally. But despite her accomplishments, she didn't flaunt them. She wasn't the type to seek accolades or recognition, unlike the man sitting a few seats away from her. This flight was supposed to be routine for both of them, Richard on his way to a major business deal that would secure his company's dominance in a new tech market, and Emily returning from a classified mission overseas. But fate had other plans. As the flight attendants began to serve drinks, Richard's agitation grew. He flagged down a passing attendant, his voice clipped. "Excuse me," he said, not bothering to hide his displeasure, "I'm curious as to why she," he nodded toward Emily, "was upgraded to first class. I wasn't aware that uniformed officers were given preferential treatment." The flight attendant stiffened, caught off guard by his confrontation. "Sir, Captain Carter was upgraded as a courtesy for her service. It's a policy we sometimes extend to members of the armed forces." Richard scoffed. "Well, I'm a loyal customer. I spend hundreds of thousands a year with your airline, but I don't see myself being upgraded for simply doing my job." Emily overheard the exchange but remained composed. She wasn't a stranger to this kind of resentment. People often made assumptions about her based on her rank or her uniform, but it didn't faze her. Instead, she focused on the book she had been reading. Richard, however, wasn't done. He glanced at her again, as if waiting for her to acknowledge his irritation, but when she didn't, it only fueled his frustration. The flight seemed interminable, every little noise and movement setting Richard further on edge. The clinking of glasses, the muffled conversations, the slight turbulence, it all grated on him. He tried to distract himself with work, but his thoughts kept drifting back to the officer sitting across from him. As the hours passed, tension filled the air. Richard's dissatisfaction simmered, creating an uncomfortable atmosphere around him. He couldn't shake the feeling that his space had been intruded upon by someone who, in his mind, hadn't earned it. But all of that would soon be trivial in the face of what was coming. The first sign of trouble was subtle. A faint tremor passed through the cabin, a slight jolt that could easily have been mistaken for turbulence. But when it happened again, stronger this time, the flight attendants exchanged worried glances. The captain's voice came over the intercom, calm but with a tone that commanded attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing a bit of technical difficulty. Please remain seated and keep your seatbelts fastened. We'll have more information shortly." Richard's irritation shifted to mild concern. He glanced around the cabin, noticing others doing the same. Some whispered anxiously to their companions, while others tried to remain composed. Emily, however, didn't flinch. Her years of training kicked in, and she quietly assessed the situation, her mind already running through possible scenarios. A sudden lurch knocked several passengers forward, and the overhead bins rattled. A murmur of panic rippled through the cabin. Richard gripped his armrest tightly, his knuckles white. The flight attendants were now moving more swiftly, securing loose items and checking seatbelts. Then, the plane dropped. It wasn't a smooth descent. It was a sudden, stomach-churning fall that sent trays clattering to the floor and passengers gasping in fear. The lights flickered, and the hum of the engines changed to a strained whine. "Brace! Brace for impact," the flight attendants shouted, their voices cutting through the panic. Richard's heart raced as adrenaline surged through his veins. His mind reeled with the thought that this could be it, that his life, all his success, might end in a fiery crash in the middle of nowhere. He looked around wildly, seeing the terror in the faces of those around him. His eyes landed on Emily, and to his astonishment, she was calm. Focused. As the plane continued its harrowing descent, the captain's voice crackled through the speakers again, strained but controlled. "We're making an emergency landing. Everyone, prepare yourselves." The cabin erupted into chaos. Passengers screamed, clutched their loved ones, prayed. Richard could barely think as panic seized him. But in the midst of it all, Emily unbuckled her seatbelt, steadying herself as she stood up. "What are you doing?" Richard blurted out, incredulous. "Sit down." Ignoring him, Emily moved toward the cockpit, navigating the turbulent cabin with an unshakable sense of purpose. The flight attendants tried to stop her, but she flashed her military credentials and exchanged hurried words with them before they let her pass. Moments later, Emily emerged from the cockpit with a grim expression. She addressed the passengers, her voice loud and authoritative, cutting through the noise. "Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Captain Emily Carter of the United States Air Force. I need everyone to remain calm and follow instructions. We've lost partial control of the plane, but we are trained for this. I've coordinated with the pilots, and were preparing for an emergency landing. "We need all hands on deck, so listen carefully." Richard's jaw dropped. The same woman he had dismissed so easily, the same woman he had been so irritated by, was now taking control of the situation. His mind raced to comprehend the shift. He had assumed she was just another passenger, someone undeserving of being in first class, but now she was stepping up to save their lives. Emily's calm demeanor seemed to have a profound effect on the passengers. Fear still lingered, but there was a new sense of trust, a belief that if anyone could pull them through this, it was her. She began coordinating with the crew, instructing them on emergency procedures, ensuring everyone was properly buckled in, and organizing passengers to assist with tasks that would prepare for the landing. Richard, still dazed, watched in awe as Emily moved through the cabin, directing with confidence and precision. She had taken control of the situation in a way that no one else could. Despite the chaos, she never wavered, her voice steady, her actions decisive. Suddenly, the plane lurched again, a violent shudder that sent more passengers screaming in terror. Richard's heart hammered in his chest as the ground loomed closer through the windows. Emily was shouting instructions, her voice rising above the din, but everything was a blur. And then, impact. The plane skidded across an open field, metal screeching, sparks flying as it bounced along the uneven ground. The jarring force threw Richard forward, and he felt his head smack against the seat in front of him. Pain shot through his body, but he was alive. The plane slowed to a grinding halt, smoke rising from the engines as they sputtered and died. The aftermath was a mixture of chaos and relief. Emergency crews arrived within minutes, extracting passengers, tending to the injured, and assessing the damage. The plane was a wreck, but miraculously, most had survived. As Richard stumbled out of the wreckage, still in shock, he saw Emily again. She was helping passengers off the plane, guiding them to safety with the same calm authority she had displayed throughout the crisis. He watched as she moved with purpose, her uniform now dirted and torn, but her composure unbroken. For the first time in his life, Richard felt truly humbled. He had always measured people by their titles, their status, and their wealth. But here was a woman who had shown true leadership, bravery, and skill in a moment when it mattered most, qualities he had sorely underestimated. Later, as the survivors were gathered at a makeshift shelter, Richard found Emily sitting quietly by herself, her face a mixture of exhaustion and relief. He approached her, his usual arrogance replaced by something else, something closer to respect. "Captain Carter," he began, his voice hesitant, I owe you an apology. I misjudged you." Emily looked up at him, her expression unreadable. "It's easy to misjudge people when you don't know their story." Richard nodded, feeling the weight of her words. "I'm not used to being wrong, but today, I was. You saved us." "I did what I was trained to do," Emily replied simply, but there was no pride in her tone, just the quiet humility of someone who had done their duty. Richard extended his hand. "Thank you." Emily took it, her grip firm, but her eyes softened just a fraction. "You're welcome." As Richard walked away, he couldn't shake the feeling that his perspective on life had shifted. He had always prided himself on being in control, on being the one with all the answers. But today had shown him that sometimes, control was an illusion. And sometimes, the people who truly deserved first class were the ones who had earned their place not through money or status, but through courage, integrity, and service. The end.